It all began with a single, seemingly innocent question. We were having dinner when she casually asked if I had ever considered the idea of an open marriage. At first, I chuckled, thinking she was just messing around, but the look in her eyes quickly told me otherwise. I couldn't believe the words coming out of her mouth, but the more I dug into the conversation, the more I uncovered secrets she'd been keeping from me for months. Up until that moment, I thought my life was pretty standard, maybe even good, married for 13 years to a woman I adored, living comfortably in Chicago, both of us with solid jobs, no real drama to speak of. That's how life was for me and Amanda. She was always thoughtful, the kind of wife who'd pack you a lunch when you were in a rush or send you a random "miss you" text in the middle of a busy day. Honestly, I used to think I was one of the lucky ones. That was until about a month ago, when Amanda hit me with something I never saw coming. It was a regular weeknight dinner at home, nothing out of the ordinary, just the two of us. She had made spaghetti, and we were chatting about work, the usual stuff. Then, in the middle of swirling her fork around some pasta, she drops it on me, "Have you ever thought about opening up our marriage?" I nearly choked on my food. Honestly, if she had told me she was quitting her job and moving to another country, I would have been less shocked. I just stared at her, trying to figure out if she was joking or serious, but her face stayed calm, no nervous smile, no awkward laugh. She was dead serious. "Wait, what?" I finally asked, thinking maybe I had misunderstood what she said. "You know, like some couples do," she said, her eyes glued to her plate, almost like she was suggesting we pick up a new hobby or something. "They still love each other but also see other people. I've just been thinking about it." Suddenly, the room felt colder. This was the woman I'd shared over a decade of my life with. We'd gone through everything together, our ups, our downs, our victories, and here she was, out of nowhere, bringing this up. It felt like the ground beneath me had shifted. I didn't even know how to respond at first. My mind was struggling to process what she had just said. This was Amanda, my wife of 13 years, the same woman who couldn't even keep a secret about a surprise birthday gift, and now she was suggesting something like this? I pushed my plate away, my appetite disappearing. "You're really serious about this?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady, though my stomach was doing somersaults. Amanda shrugged, still not meeting my eyes, just poking at her half-eaten plate of spaghetti. "It's just a thought. I've been mulling it over and wanted to know what you thought." She was talking like she had just suggested we repaint the bedroom, not something that could blow up our entire marriage. "What made you start thinking about this?" I pressed. I needed to know where this was coming from, because nothing in our relationship had ever hinted at this. She paused, winding her fork around a single strand of pasta. "Well, some of my friends have been talking about it, and it made me wonder if it might be something that could work for us. I mean, we've been together for a long time, Nick. Maybe it would keep things exciting." A cold sensation crept up my back. Exciting? Was she really so bored with our life together? The way she was talking, it felt like she was about to leap off a cliff into something dangerous, while I was still standing on solid ground, struggling to understand. But I didn't want to blow up just yet. I chose to hear her out, even though my gut was screaming that this conversation was about to go in a direction I wouldn't like. "Have you been unhappy?" I asked softly, trying to read her face. "Is there something you're not telling me?" Amanda finally raised her eyes to meet mine, and in them, I saw a mix of guilt and resolve. "No, it's not that I'm unhappy," she said quickly. "I still love you, Nick. I just think this could be something new, something different." Different. That word clung to me, echoing in my mind like a distant alarm. I struggled to process it. Amanda was the last person I would have imagined wanting something like this. I always thought our marriage was rock solid. At least, that's what I believed. "You don't have to make any decisions right now," she added, leaning back in her chair. "I just wanted to put it out there. If it's something you're not comfortable with, we don't have to do it. There it was, the little escape route she was offering me, like she was trying to soften the blow. But the damage had already been done. The mere fact that she had brought this up made me start questioning everything I thought I knew about our relationship. I nodded slowly, afraid that if I said anything more, I'd let my emotions slip. Yeah, I'll think about it. But in the back of my mind, a darker thought began to creep in. What if this wasn't just some idea she was toying with? What if she was already seeing someone else? After that dinner, something changed between us. Amanda carried on like nothing had happened, going about her day as if our conversation never took place. But for me, it was like a constant buzzing in my head, a background noise I couldn't ignore. Every time I looked at her, I couldn't help but wonder if I was missing something. Was she already seeing someone else? Was she planning something behind my back? I hated that these thoughts were taking root, but I couldn't shake them. At night, while Amanda slept peacefully beside me, I lay there wide awake, staring at the ceiling, replaying our conversation again and again. What if it was just a fleeting idea she'd picked up from her friends? But what if it wasn't? That question kept spinning around in my brain, making it impossible for me to sleep. I started thinking about her friends, especially Melissa and Katie, who she had been hanging out with more often lately. I'd met them a few times at gatherings, and they always struck me as the kind of women who liked to push the boundaries. They were both younger, more carefree, in ways Amanda had never been. When we got married, she was the steady one, the one who kept things grounded. But now, maybe being around them was giving her some new ideas. I began paying closer attention to Amanda's behavior. It started small. Her phone was always within arm's reach, even when we were just sitting on the couch watching TV. Late at night, I'd hear the soft ping of incoming messages. When I'd ask who it was, she'd just smile and say, "Oh, it's just Melissa being her usual self." I tried to brush it off. I really did. But that gnawing feeling in my gut kept telling me something was off, and soon enough, I couldn't shake the suspicion that maybe, just maybe, Amanda was already crossing a line I hadn't noticed. One night, after she had fallen asleep, I found myself standing in front of her laptop, which she had left sitting on the kitchen counter. My heart pounded in my chest as I wrestled with what to do. Was I really about to snoop on my wife? I had never been that kind of guy. I always trusted Amanda. But now, I felt like I was being dragged into this dark place where trust was slowly disintegrating. I opened the laptop, my hands shaking slightly. It was password protected, of course, but I knew Amanda well enough to guess what it would be. Our anniversary date. Sure enough, as soon as I typed it in, the screen unlocked. A wave of guilt hit me, but I pushed it aside and kept going. I sifted through her emails, checked her social media, looking for anything at all, that might explain why she had brought up the idea of an open marriage. But there was nothing. No secret messages, no flirty emails, nothing that pointed to her cheating. For a brief moment, I felt an odd sense of relief. Maybe I had been wrong, maybe I'd blown things out of proportion. But even then, something deep inside kept gnawing at me, a voice that whispered I hadn't found the real problem yet. I closed the laptop softly, careful not to make a sound, and went back to bed. As I lay there in the dark, I couldn't shake the feeling that Amanda was hiding something, but it wasn't something I could find on a screen. Over the next few days, I tried to act like everything was fine. I wanted to believe I had imagined the whole thing, that Amanda's curiosity wasn't anything serious. But the more I tried to convince myself, the clearer it became that something was off. Amanda was distracted whenever we talked, her replies short and distant, like her mind was somewhere else. We'd sit together at dinner, but she'd spend more time scrolling through her phone than engaging with me. Even though she was physically there, it felt like her attention was far away, maybe with someone else. Then came Friday night, the night everything really started to unravel. Amanda was getting ready to go out with Melissa and Katie. They'd been planning this girls' night for a while, and I had no issue with it, I wanted her to have fun, to enjoy herself. But that nagging feeling in my gut just wouldn't quit. As she stood in front of the mirror, putting on her lipstick, I casually asked, "So, where are you guys headed tonight?" "Oh, just a bar downtown," she replied without turning away from her reflection. "It'll be fun. We'll probably get back late. Want me to pick you up if you've had too much to drink?" I offered. She let out a small laugh. "No, don't worry about it. We'll just grab an Uber." There was something about the way she said it, dismissive, almost, that rubbed me the wrong way. I tried telling myself I was overthinking it, that this was just a normal night out with friends. But the doubt had already set in, and it was growing. After she left, I couldn't stop pacing around the house, trying to shake the uneasy feeling. I thought about texting her just to check in, but I didn't want to be that husband, the guy sitting at home, glued to his phone, imagining worst-case scenarios. So I tried to distract myself. I flipped on the TV, cracked open a beer, but no matter what I did, my mind kept drifting back to Amanda. As the hours went by, I couldn't resist any longer. I grabbed my phone and sent her a text, "How's your night going?" I stared at the screen, waiting for the reply. Minutes passed. Then an hour. Still nothing. I told myself she was just busy, enjoying the night with her friends. She'd get back to me when she could. But that nagging voice in the back of my mind kept whispering, what if she's not with them at all? It was nearing midnight when her response finally came through. "Hey, sorry, just having fun. Love you." I wanted to believe her, I really did. But there was something about that message. It felt too perfect, too rehearsed, and the fact that it took her so long to reply only deepened my suspicion. Unable to sleep, I found myself sitting on the couch, watching the hours slip by. Amanda didn't get home until close to 3 a.m., and when she did, something felt off. She barely said a word, quietly slipping into the bedroom and mumbling something about being too tired to talk. I lay there in the dark, feeling her next to me, yet somehow it felt like she was miles away. As I stared at the ceiling, I couldn't shake the sense that something was seriously wrong. I just didn't know how deep it really went. The weekend drifted by in silence. Amanda spent most of her time glued to her phone or coming up with reasons to leave the house, running errands, meeting up with friends, anything that kept her away. I tried to act like things were normal, but inside, I was restless. My mind was racing, trying to figure out what was really going on. By Sunday night, after we had finished dinner, I knew I couldn't let this feeling sit any longer. I had to bring it up again. As Amanda cleared the dishes, I leaned against the counter, watching her closely. "So, I've been thinking about that conversation we had," I started carefully, keeping my voice as calm as I could. She glanced at me but didn't stop washing the plates. "Which conversation?" "About the open marriage thing," I said, trying to sound casual. For a split second, Amanda froze, her hand hovering above the sink, but then she continued rinsing off the dishes. "Oh, that. Yeah, that," I repeated. "I've been trying to make sense of it. I mean, you kind of dropped it out of the blue, and now. I don't know. It feels like we haven't even talked about it since." She let out a sigh, drying her hands on a towel before turning to face me. "Nick, I told you, it was just something I wanted to bring up. I wasn't trying to push anything. You said you'd think about it, so I've been giving you space." Her words sounded reasonable enough, but her face told a different story. She looked tense, almost defensive, like she was bracing herself for an accusation. I wasn't ready to go there yet, but I also wasn't ready to let this go. "I get that, but something doesn't feel right, Amanda," I said, trying to tread lightly. "It's like you're not really here anymore. I can't shake the feeling that you're keeping something from me." Her eyes flicked down to the floor for a second before she crossed her arms over her chest. "I'm not hiding anything. I've just been busy, okay? My friends are dealing with stuff, work's been crazy, life happens, you know. It sounded like a perfectly normal explanation, but it didn't account for the distance I felt between us. It didn't explain why my gut was screaming at me that something was wrong. Busy or not, I said, trying hard to keep the frustration out of my voice, we haven't really talked about us. I mean, do you even want to be with me anymore? Because that's what it feels like. You're here, but you're not really here. Her face softened a little, and she took a step closer, reaching out to touch my arm. Nick, of course I want to be with you. I love you. I wouldn't have brought up the open marriage if I didn't. That threw me for a loop. Wait, what? She gave me a small, sad smile. I only brought it up because I didn't want to lose you. I thought maybe if we tried something different, it would help us stay connected. Stay connected. The more she talked, the less sense it made to me. How was opening up our marriage supposed to bring us closer? But the way she said it, with that sincere tone, almost made me believe her. Almost. I nodded, deciding not to press her any further, at least for now. All right, I'll keep thinking about it, I said quietly. Amanda gave me a weak smile and went back to cleaning up, like that conversation had resolved everything. But I wasn't buying it. Something still felt off, and the more I thought about it, the clearer it became that this wasn't just about us drifting apart. There was something else going on, something Amanda wasn't telling me. And I was determined to find out what. By the next week, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was slipping through my fingers, that Amanda wasn't being upfront. I had gone from feeling confused and hurt to becoming obsessed with figuring out the truth. Her sudden suggestion of an open marriage had blindsided me, but now, it felt like there was a lot more bubbling under the surface. I couldn't ignore it any longer. One evening, after Amanda headed to bed early, saying she had a headache, I found myself sitting in the living room, staring blankly at the TV. My mind was racing, replaying the last few weeks, trying to pinpoint when things had started to go wrong. What had changed? Why did it feel like she was slowly slipping away, right in front of me? The laptop was sitting on the coffee table, just like it had been the night I checked it before. I knew I hadn't found anything suspicious then, but something inside me snapped. I needed answers. Amanda had been so careful, no strange texts, no weird emails. But that only made me more determined to uncover the truth if there was one. I opened the laptop again, feeling that familiar rush of guilt wash over me. The screen lit up, and I started digging through her browser history. It was mostly the usual stuff, shopping sites, social media, a few articles. But then I found something that stopped me in my tracks. She had been using incognito mode. I clicked it open, and my stomach tightened. Amanda had been visiting online forums about open marriages and polyamory. This wasn't just some casual curiosity, she had been researching it extensively. There were posts from months ago, long before she had mentioned it to me. She had been planning this for quite some time. I kept scrolling, my heart sinking with every click. She had even left comments under an anonymous username, but I knew it was her. She'd been asking for advice on how to introduce the idea of an open marriage to a traditional partner, how to convince me to go along with it. Suddenly, it all made sense. This wasn't some spontaneous thought she'd had. She had been building up to this for months, and I couldn't shake the feeling that she hadn't been doing it alone. I kept digging, desperate to find more. That's when I noticed something strange. There were gaps in her text history with Melissa, her best friend. It wasn't obvious at first, but certain parts of their conversations were missing, like they had been deleted. My blood ran cold. What if Melissa wasn't just her friend? What if she had been helping Amanda all along, covering for her, encouraging her? The weight of it all crashed down on me. This wasn't just Amanda being curious or wanting to explore something new. This was betrayal. I knew I wasn't imagining things. Something had been off for a long time, and now I was beginning to see the cracks. But I wasn't ready to confront her, not yet. I needed more proof. I needed to be sure. I closed the laptop, my hands shaking, and leaned back on the couch. It felt like I was drowning in suspicion, gasping for air. If Amanda had been hiding this, what else could she be hiding? How far had she already gone? The next few days felt like I was just biding my time. I had become hyper-aware of everything Amanda did, every glance at her phone, every time she left the house without a solid reason. I was looking for any clue, any sign that would validate my suspicions, and I knew it was only a matter of time before the truth came to light. On Thursday evening, Amanda mentioned she was going over to Melissa's for another girls' night. That familiar knot tightened in my gut, the same way it had the last time. She was dressed casually, nothing out of the ordinary, but the way she carefully applied her makeup and lingered in front of the mirror struck me as odd. Was she really going to see Melissa? "Do you need me to drop you off?" I asked, trying to sound casual, despite the suspicion gnawing at me. "No, it's fine. I'll drive myself," she replied, flashing me a quick smile that felt almost too rehearsed. "I'll probably be out late, so don't wait up." The moment she walked out the door, I grabbed my keys and followed her. I didn't have a clear plan, just a burning need to know where she was really going. I kept a safe distance, my heart pounding in my chest as I tailed her through the streets. Part of me still expected her to head toward Melissa's house, but when she took a completely different route, my stomach dropped. She pulled into the parking lot of a restaurant, not just any casual bar or spot, but a nicer place, the kind of place we used to go to for our date nights, the Vine Bistro. I parked a few spaces away, my hands sweaty on the steering wheel. Was she meeting someone here? I watched as Amanda stepped out of the car and glanced around, like she was checking to make sure no one was watching. Then she hurried toward the entrance, her heels clicking on the pavement. I waited a few minutes before going inside, keeping my head low as I walked into the dimly lit restaurant. I spotted her almost immediately. She was seated in a booth near the back, and sitting across from her wasn't Melissa, it was a man I'd never seen before. He was tall, wearing a crisp button-down shirt, his posture relaxed as he leaned in to talk to her. The way Amanda smiled at him, the way her hand casually brushed his across the table, it was all I needed to see. My chest tightened as I stood frozen near the entrance, trying to wrap my mind around what I was witnessing. This wasn't just a friendly dinner. This was something else entirely. It felt like all the air had been sucked out of the room. Amanda hadn't just been thinking about an open marriage, she was already living it. I slipped back outside before she could spot me, my mind spinning. The reality of what I had just seen hit me like a punch to the gut. Amanda had been lying to me for weeks, maybe even months. Everything she'd said about wanting to keep things exciting was just a front for what she'd already been doing behind my back. I sat in my car for what felt like hours, staring blankly out the windshield, trying to make sense of it all. The woman I had trusted for 13 years had betrayed me in the worst way imaginable. And the hardest part? She had been careful, too careful. There were no obvious signs because she never thought I'd follow her, never thought I'd dig deep enough to uncover her secret. But now I knew. And there was no going back. The drive home felt surreal, like I was watching someone else's life fall apart in slow motion. Amanda's face kept flashing in my mind, her smile, the way she had so effortlessly brushed that man's hand, like this was normal for her. Every doubt, every suspicion that had been eating away at me was now confirmed. She was cheating on me. There was no other explanation for what I had seen. By the time I pulled into the driveway, the anger was simmering just beneath the surface. I didn't want to lose it, but I knew I couldn't keep this bottled up any longer. She would be home soon, and when she walked through that door, everything would change. The life we had built over the past 13 years was about to shatter into 1,000 pieces. I paced around the living room, trying to figure out how I was going to confront her. Part of me wanted to throw all the evidence in her face, the secret forum posts, the deleted texts, the fact that I had followed her and saw her with another man. But another part of me just felt hollow, like I had lost her the moment she brought up the idea of an open marriage. It was well after midnight and I heard Amanda's car pull into the driveway. My heart raced as the headlights flashed through the window, and a moment later, the front door creaked open. She stepped inside, looking tired but content, as if she had just come back from an ordinary night out. "Hey," she said softly, kicking off her shoes. "Sorry I'm so late. We ended up staying out longer than I thought." I stood there, arms crossed, staring at her. The anger that had been bubbling inside me was ready to boil over, but I fought to keep my voice steady. "You weren't with Melissa tonight." Amanda froze, her hand still halfway to her purse. She turned to look at me, her eyes widening slightly. "What are you talking about?" "I followed you," I said, my voice ice cold. "I saw you at the Vine Bistro." "With him?" Her face went pale. For a second, she just stood there, speechless, her mouth opening and closing like she was searching for the right words. But the guilt was written all over her face. She knew she was caught. "Nick, it's not what you think," she finally managed, taking a small step toward me. I laughed bitterly. "Not what I think. You were having dinner with another man. You've been lying to me for weeks, maybe months, and you expect me to believe it's not what I think?" Tears welled up in Amanda's eyes, and she reached out to touch my arm, but I stepped back, out of her reach. "Please, just let me explain," she pleaded, her voice shaking. It's complicated." "Complicated?" I snapped. "No, Amanda, it's pretty damn simple. You've been cheating on me. You've been seeing someone else, lying to my face, and then coming home to me like everything's fine." Tears streamed down her cheeks now, and she wiped them away angrily, as if trying to hold herself together. "I didn't mean for it to happen this way. I was going to tell you, but I didn't know how." I shook my head, barely able to believe what I was hearing. "When you brought up the open marriage, that was just your way of easing me into it, wasn't it? You wanted to keep seeing him, but you didn't want to feel guilty about it." She nodded slowly, her voice barely a whisper. "Yes. But it didn't start like that. We were just friends, I swear. And then, I don't know. It got out of hand." I stared at her, struggling to contain the mix of anger and heartbreak welling up inside me. "So you thought asking for an open marriage would make it okay? You thought I'd just go along with it so you could keep cheating without any consequences?" Her sobs grew louder, her hands trembling as she clutched her purse to her chest. "I didn't want to hurt you, Nick. I love you. I really do. But I don't know how to fix this." Hearing those words broke something inside me, but I knew the truth now. There was no fixing this. Amanda had made her choice, and it had destroyed everything between us. "I don't want to hear it," I said quietly. "I want a divorce." Amanda's head shot up, her tear-streaked face full of panic. "No, please, don't say that. We can work through this. I made a mistake, but I still love you. We can go to counseling, we can." "I'm done," I cut her off, my voice firm and final. "You made your choice, and now I'm making mine." The days after that confrontation felt surreal, like I was living someone else's life. The home Amanda and I had shared for over a decade now felt cold and unfamiliar, like it belonged to strangers. I moved into the guest room, leaving the bedroom to her. But even that distance didn't escape the thick tension that hung between us. Amanda did everything she could to get me to reconsider. She apologized constantly, told me how much she loved me, and swore it hadn't gone too far with the guy she'd been seeing. She claimed it had only been an emotional affair, that nothing physical had happened. But it didn't matter anymore. Whether they'd slept together or not, the betrayal ran too deep, too raw. Every time I looked at her, every time she tried to talk to me, all I could see was her sitting across from that man, smiling at him the way she used to smile at me. I couldn't get that image out of my head, and I didn't want to hear her excuses. She had broken something in me that couldn't be put back together. One evening, she sat down next to me on the couch, her face pale, her eyes swollen from crying. "Nick, please," she whispered. "We can fix this. We can go to therapy, work on our marriage. I don't want to lose you." I kept my eyes on the TV, my jaw clenched. "Amanda, it's over. I told you that. There's no going back." Her voice cracked as she reached for my hand, but I pulled it away. "I love you. I was stupid. I made a mistake, but I love you." "Love?" I laughed bitterly, finally turning to face her. "You don't cheat on someone you love. You don't lie to their face and then come home and pretend like everything's fine. That's not love, Amanda. You don't even understand what you've done, do you?" She started crying again, but this time, I didn't feel any sympathy. I couldn't. I had spent years trusting her, believing in us, and now it felt like those years had been wasted on someone I didn't even recognize anymore. "I thought about it," I said, my voice hardening. "About giving you another chance. I really did. But then I realized something. I can't live like this. I can't look at you and not see what you did. Even if we went to therapy, even if we tried to work things out, I would never trust you again. Do you understand that? It's gone." Her sobs filled the room, and for a brief moment, I almost felt bad for her. Almost. But then I remembered how we got here. She made her decision, and now we were both living with the consequences. "I'll move out," she said quietly, wiping her eyes with the back of her hand. "I know I can't stay here like this. But Nick, please, can we just talk to someone? One last try." I shook my head. "I've already talked to a lawyer. I'm filing for divorce." She gasped, like I had just dealt the final blow. I hadn't mentioned the lawyer until now. I wanted to be absolutely sure, and after countless sleepless nights, I knew I had made the right decision. Amanda stood up and paced the room, as if she was trying to make sense of everything that was happening. "This can't be it," she muttered. "This can't be how it ends." "It ended the moment you decided to lie to me," I said coldly. "I don't care if you didn't sleep with him. You betrayed me, and that's enough." She collapsed onto the couch, her body shaking with sobs. But I was done. I had given her the benefit of the doubt once, when she first brought up the idea of an open marriage. I had even checked her phone and computer, hoping to find nothing, hoping I was wrong. But now I knew the truth, it had been going on long before I found out, and I couldn't pretend anymore. I stood up, feeling an odd sense of calm settle over me. "I'll pack my things tomorrow," I said. "You can keep the house. I don't want anything from you." Amanda looked up at me, her eyes filled with desperation. "Nick, please don't. We can start over." I shook my head slowly. "No, Amanda. We can't." I walked out of the room, leaving her sobbing on the couch. I knew there was no point in dragging this out any longer. Whatever love I had for her was gone, replaced by a dull ache I knew would take time to heal. But I also knew that this was the only way forward. I had to let her go. I had to let us go. The next morning, I packed my bags. It felt surreal, gathering up the pieces of a life I had spent more than a decade building with Amanda, only to watch it crumble in a matter of days. I could hear her moving quietly around the house, her footsteps soft, as if she was afraid to disturb me. But there was no need for her to tiptoe anymore. We both knew where this was headed. As I zipped up my suitcase, I paused for a moment, looking around the guest room. It felt strange to think that this was it. All the memories, all the moments we shared, the laughter, the quiet mornings, the late-night talks, they were all part of a life that didn't exist anymore. Amanda had taken something from me when she betrayed me, something I could never get back. She appeared at the door as I was about to leave, standing there in her robe, her face pale and drained from sleepless nights. Her eyes were swollen from crying, but she didn't say anything. Maybe she had run out of words, or maybe she knew there was nothing left to say that would change what had already been set in motion. "I'll be staying at a hotel for now," I said flatly, not making eye contact. "Once the paperwork is sorted, we'll figure out the rest." Amanda opened her mouth as if to speak, but no words came out. She just nodded slowly, her hands trembling as she gripped the edges of her robe. There was so much I could have said, so many things I could have thrown back at her, but in the end, what would be the point? I walked out without looking back. I left the house, the same house where we had built a life together, and stepped into the cool morning air. The weight of everything was crushing, but at the same time, there was an odd sense of relief. I had made my choice, and there was no going back now. As I drove away, my mind raced with thoughts of what came next. A part of me wondered if I had made the right decision, if maybe, just maybe, there was a way to salvage what was left of our marriage. But that thought passed quickly. The trust was gone, and without trust, there was nothing left to build on. No matter how much I had loved Amanda, we were done. Still, the road ahead wasn't as clear as I'd hoped it would be. I kept thinking about Amanda's last plea for counseling, her desperation to save what we had even after all the damage. There was a time when I would have fought for us, would have done anything to keep our marriage alive. But now, I wasn't sure if there was anything left worth saving. And yet, as the miles stretched ahead of me, I couldn't help but wonder, was this really the end, or was there still a part of me holding on to the hope of a different outcome? The questions lingered, unanswered, as I drove toward the unknown. The next few weeks passed in a blur. I checked into a hotel and threw myself into work, trying to distract myself from the weight of everything that had happened. But no matter how busy I kept myself, the reality always crept back in during the quiet moments. The silence of the hotel room at night was suffocating. I had left behind everything I knew, our home, our routines, the life we'd shared, and now I was surrounded by an emptiness I couldn't fill. Amanda called a few times, leaving voicemails I couldn't bring myself to listen to. I wasn't ready to hear her apologies, her pleas to fix things. It was too soon. I wasn't even sure if I could ever face her again without feeling the sting of what she'd done. I met with my lawyer to officially start the divorce process. Sitting in that office, going through the paperwork, it all felt so cold and detached. The end of a marriage boiled down to signatures and legal jargon. I never thought it would come to this, but there I was, signing away the life I thought we had built. A part of me kept wondering if I was doing the right thing. Amanda had made a huge mistake, but wasn't marriage supposed to be about working through the hard times? Had I really done everything I could to save us, or had I given up too soon? Those thoughts haunted me, but every time I started to doubt my decision, I remembered the look on her face when I confronted her, the lies she had told, the man she had chosen over me. That was what kept me moving forward, reminding me that trust, once shattered, was nearly impossible to rebuild. One evening, I received a text from Amanda. It was short, direct. "Can we talk? Just once. I need closure. You do too." I stared at the message for what felt like forever, my thumb hovering over the screen, unsure of how to respond. Part of me wanted to ignore it, to cut ties completely and move on. But another part of me, the part that still remembered the good times, the part that had loved her for more than a decade, wanted to hear what she had to say. Reluctantly, I agreed to meet her. We chose a coffee shop, a neutral spot where we could talk without the weight of the past crushing down on us. When I arrived, Amanda was already there, sitting by the window, nervously fidgeting with her coffee cup. She looked worn out, like she hadn't slept in days. Her eyes, once so full of life, were now clouded with regret and sadness. I sat down across from her, unsure of how to start. The silence between us was thick and uncomfortable before Amanda finally broke it. "Thank you for coming," she said softly, her voice shaky. "I know I don't deserve it, but I appreciate it." I nodded, still unsure of what to say. Part of me wanted to unleash all the anger I had been holding in, to tell her just how deeply she had hurt me. But another part of me just wanted to listen. I messed up, Nick, she continued, her eyes welling with tears. I know that. I've been thinking about it every day since you left, and I don't even know how I let it get this far. I'm so sorry. Her words hung in the air, and I could tell she meant them. But, sorry, wasn't enough, not now. Maybe not ever. I watched as Amanda struggled to find the right words, her hands shaking as she spoke. A part of me felt pity for her, but the other part of me, the part that had been broken by her betrayal, couldn't let go of the hurt. I had spent so many nights wondering how we had ended up here, how everything we built over the last 13 years had fallen apart so quickly. Amanda, I began slowly, trying to gather my thoughts. I understand being scared. I get that. But what you did, the lies, the secrecy, that's not something I can just forget. You didn't trust me enough to be honest from the start, and now I don't know if I'll ever be able to trust you again. Amanda's face crumpled as tears streamed down her cheeks. I know, she whispered, her voice barely audible. I know I broke your trust, and I'll regret it for the rest of my life. I wish I could take it all back, but I can't. All I can do now is say I'm sorry and hope that maybe, one day, you'll find it in your heart to forgive me. The word forgive echoed in my mind. Forgiveness was something I hadn't even considered. Could I ever forgive her? Could I let go of the anger, the hurt, and somehow move past it? I wasn't sure, but one thing was clear, our marriage was beyond saving. The damage ran too deep, and the betrayal cut too raw. I don't know if I can ever forgive you, I said quietly, my voice steady. I don't know if I'll ever be able to look at you and not see what you did. I came here to listen, and I'm glad you were honest, but this is the end for us, Amanda. Her sobs grew louder as she buried her face in her hands, her shoulders shaking. I felt a lump rising in my throat, but I kept it together. There wasn't anything left to say. The love I had once felt for her was now buried beneath layers of pain, and I didn't know if it would ever resurface. We sat there in silence, the weight of everything we had lost hanging heavily between us. After a while, Amanda wiped her tears and looked up at me with red, swollen eyes. I'll let you go, she said, her voice barely holding together. I understand. I just wanted you to know how sorry I am for all of it. I nodded. I appreciate that. And I'm sorry too. Sorry it had to end this way. With that, I stood up, feeling the finality of the moment sink in. Amanda remained seated, her hands gripping the coffee cup like it was the only thing holding her steady. I wanted to say something more, something comforting, but I knew it wouldn't change anything. We were finished. As I stepped out of the coffee shop, the cool air hit my face, and for the first time in weeks, I felt a strange sense of peace. It wasn't exactly relief, but more like a quiet acceptance. The road ahead was uncertain, but at least now, I could start moving forward. The days that followed my conversation with Amanda were a whirlwind of emotions, relief, sadness, and occasional bursts of anger. I thought I would feel more closure after our talk, but instead, I found myself wrestling with the weight of everything we had lost. 13 years of marriage, countless memories, and now it was all over, packed away in a box labeled, the past. I focused on the practicalities. I met with my lawyer again, finalized the paperwork, and we sorted out the division of assets. Amanda and I agreed that she would keep the house. I didn't want it anymore, it was full of memories I no longer wanted to carry with me. She offered to move out, but I knew that finding somewhere new, somewhere that was just mine, was what I needed. I found a small apartment across town. It wasn't much, but it was a fresh start. The first few nights in the apartment were quiet, almost too quiet. I would lie awake, staring at the unfamiliar ceiling, listening to the distant hum of the city, wondering how everything had gone so wrong. But over time, the place started to feel like a new beginning. I filled it with new furniture, hung up art on the walls, and little by little, it began to feel like home. Amanda and I kept our distance after the divorce. It went through without much drama, no long court battles or bitter fights. We both knew it was over, and we handled it with as much dignity as we could. Still, every now and then, I'd catch myself thinking about her, wondering how she was doing, if she was happy. I didn't hate her anymore, but I knew there was no going back. The scars were too deep. A few months after everything was finalized, I ran into a mutual friend. We made small talk, catching up, and eventually, the conversation shifted to Amanda. "She's doing okay," they said, a bit hesitantly. "She's been through a lot, but I think she's trying to move on, just like you." I nodded, unsure of how to feel. Part of me was glad to hear she was doing well, but another part still stung with the reminder of all we'd lost. As time passed, I started to feel a little lighter. The anger and hurt that had once consumed me began to fade, slowly replaced by a quiet determination to move forward. I spent more time with friends, focused on my work, and began the long process of rebuilding my life. It wasn't easy, starting over never is, but I knew it was the only way to truly heal. One evening, I found myself sitting on the balcony of my apartment, watching the sunset. The sky was painted in shades of orange and pink, and for the first time in a while, I felt at peace. I had weathered the storm, and though I was still standing in its aftermath, I knew I was going to be okay. There would always be a part of me that remembered Amanda and what we had shared, but it was time to let go. Time to stop looking back and start focusing on the future. Whatever that future held, I was ready to face it. As the months went by, life began to feel normal again, or at least a new kind of normal. I threw myself into work, started running in the mornings, and reconnected with old friends. At first, it was strange, navigating a world without Amanda. For so long, she had been part of who I was. But now, I was figuring out how to define myself without her. I even started dating again. Nothing serious at first, just casual dinners or drinks with people I met through friends or at work. It felt awkward at the beginning, like I was relearning how to be in a relationship. But over time, I started to enjoy the process of meeting new people, discovering what life could be like with someone else. One night, after a particularly great date, I found myself reflecting on how far I had come. The person I was a year ago wouldn't have believed it was possible to feel this way again, hopeful, excited for the future. But there I was, sitting across from someone who made me laugh, someone who listened, someone who reminded me that life could be beautiful again. Of course, there were still moments when the past crept in. Amanda would cross my mind occasionally, usually during quiet moments when I wasn't expecting it. I'd wonder how she was doing, if she had found what she was searching for, if she was happy. But those thoughts didn't weigh me down like they used to. They were just memories now, a part of a chapter that had come to an end. One day, I got a letter from Amanda. It wasn't long, just a few lines. She told me she had moved to a new city, started a new job, and was trying to create a fresh start. There was no mention of the past, no lingering apologies or requests for forgiveness. Just a simple update, a way of closing the book on the history we had shared. I stared at the letter for a long time after reading it, feeling a strange mix of emotions. Part of me was relieved to know she was moving on, but another part of me felt a lingering sadness for what might have been. Still, deep down, I understood this was how it had to end. We had both made mistakes, but we were both finding our own paths forward, and that was enough. I folded the letter and tucked it away in a drawer, knowing I wouldn't need to revisit it. It served as a form of closure, a final acknowledgement that we had both moved on. Life didn't return to what it had been before, and I didn't expect it to. But little by little, day by day, it became something new, something better. I learned how to be comfortable on my own, how to find joy in the simple things, and how to trust again, both in myself and in the possibility of love. I wasn't sure what the future held, but for the first time in a long while, I wasn't afraid to face it. I was ready to embrace whatever came next, knowing that I had survived one of the toughest chapters of my life and emerged stronger on the other side. And that, I realized, was enough.